Well, hello! Welcome to Drawing with Fire. I'm Valarie, your neighborhood pyrography artist. Join with Hubcap soon. He's making his breakfast and getting that all situated, so he'll be in here in a minute. And today we are going to talk about laying out our burning. But first, let's say hi to Gila and Andrea and more people as they come in. So, what I really wanted to talk about, I see this fairly often, and I didn't want to call anybody, directly out about this. So I'm going to use my piece to point out, and that's, we're going back to the elephants. And what I want to point out is I could have laid this out better. Now, it's my very first burning, so we are going to be totally relaxed about this. We're not going to be harsh about it. But my elephants, as we discussed in the outline live last week, they look like they're floating. And there's a very big reason, besides the fact that we can't see their feet, which is part of it. They look like they're floating. And that is because there is nothing grounding them in any way, other than the oil pastel smoke that I have on there. Or not smoke, kicking up dirt. They look like they're floating. And I see people who, they get their tonal values right. And they don't have harsh outlines. Again, this is about realism, although this concept will also apply to all different kinds of art. Hey, bro. So, my elephants are floating because they have they don't have ground. Now, had I put in their feet and then put the dirt over them, it would have worked out better. It still wouldn't have been perfect, but it would have worked out better. Now, if Burl wouldn't mind, I wanted to get her permission. Can I show... Yep, you just corrected that on your piece, and I was going to ask, can I show the before and after to really, get that nailed down on example? I didn't want to just throw up your piece and we hadn't discussed it. And Burl had already planned on fixing it, but of course, because it's me and Burl, I pointed it out. And Burl hasn't been burning for, I think, about 2 years now. But thankfully, you can't tell. Her muscle memory really is still there. So I'm just waiting for... Okay, Burl says I can. Excuse me. So what I'm talking about, I'm trying to get to... She was just starting to work on this owl again. She laid it out, but she hadn't worked on it. And I didn't download the photo on my phone. So I'm trying to get to it. There we go. I'm going to save that real quick. And then what her finished piece looks like, because it's fabulous, and I'm very proud of her. Now, I don't know if... Make sure that I have the final... There we go. We'll use this one. Alrighty. Sorry, I should have been better prepared for this. So, this is what we're discussing. You see how her tree branch doesn't connect down? And this is close to the edge. Now, I don't know if Burl's framing this. And even if she's framing it, doesn't matter. So, this stick isn't connecting down. So, it looks like the owl and the stick are floating.
Sorry.
Oh, here comes Hubcap. Oh, longer than 2 years.
What?
Oh, bro. Hasn't burned in longer than 2 years.
I thought Burl was saying it was taking me 2 years to get here.
Well, close.
I'm sorry.
So, if you notice, because her stick is floating, the owl doesn't look grounded. It looks like the owl and the stick are just floating. But when he finished her piece, he fixed grounding the stick and coming off the board here. And I will better explain the coming off the board. But this is her owl done. And I am just so proud of her. She has done...
It's awesome.
It has so much more depth. And she wasn't finished with the original photo I showed. But she got her shading in. She got different values of shading in. But had she not fixed the tree, the branch, it still would have felt off, even with all this wonderful shading. And that's because the owl would not have been grounded. It just looks like it's floating there with the owl. Mm-hmm. Oh, you stopped halfway through the bear. Another thing, though, this isn't so much about Burl's piece because I know her wood is bigger. On laying out, you also need to pay attention to where you stop on the sides and the top. Because if you get too close in one area, but don't go off, it can make it feel off, off-kiltered. And that's why, for one, she took the branch all the way to the edge. Even if this piece is going to be framed, it still matters. Because maybe somebody takes it out of the frame, or what have you. But how it just stops right there, it feels very abrupt. If you're having, and he does have more wood up at the top. I can't see this side. But he does have enough on either side, I think, that it's fine. But I'm seeing quite a few people who maybe they're doing a dog and either they don't want to continue down the board or their photo doesn't have the information. And when that or they're putting lettering. When that happens, I highly recommend, if you just don't feel comfortable with adding more information to your piece, to burn a border around it, so that will help ground it. Although if you just do the head, it'll just look like a floating head. And I don't think I have an example of that. Again, I didn't want to just use anybody's piece that I found online because that's rude. But like with my raven, if I would not have continued off the board here and off the board here, it just would have been a floating head, and it would have felt a little something's wrong, but I don't know what's wrong feeling. I gotta finish the tonal values in this. But by taking it off the board, when you lay it out, like this is a giant piece. I had to watch what touched the edges. I continued the bear off the wood versus stopping right here. Had I stopped, and just left a straight line right here, it would have felt abrupt, it would have felt unfinished, it just wouldn't sit right. But by taking it off the board, which is the same thing I did in the photo, I laid out my photo exactly how I wanted it on the board. Brill's saying the
Wizard of Oz effect.
Wizard of Oz effect.
Yeah.
What does she mean by wizard?
The great and powerful Oz, the floating head.
Yes. Perfect example. Thank you, Burl.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Okay. So, we've talked about this before, about how your brain is divided into a rational, logical half and a hemisphere, and a creative hemisphere. When people look at your art, even though it is a creative endeavor, if you have a floating head or something that doesn't make sense, the rational part of their brain and yours will think something's off. And that's what when you see a floating head, you know, the brain wants to see a head connected to something, and like in the case of the owl is sitting on a branch, but if the branch is not connected to anything, then it troubles the logical part of your brain, and that's why it feels off. So if you imagine that you're taking a photograph in your compositions, and if you endeavor to make sure that there's a logical reason for whatever it is in your composition, so the owl sitting on a branch and the branch travels off frame, much like it would in a photograph, then the rational part of your brain is going to be like, oh, okay, that's cool. But if it doesn't, then it's going to bother it, and people might be a little turned off by that. Now, if you have some like artistic effects, like a fade out, or you know, some other effect that explains why your head is floating, or why there's, you know, why it's not connected, then that might work. But you'll have to take that on a case-by-case basis, and you'll know it works because you won't be bothered by it. But if there's just like an abrupt, if there's just like if the branches end abruptly and you know they're not connected to anything, or the head is just not connected to anything and just looks disembodied, the rational part of your brain is going to have a problem with that, and so will other people, and they'll be less attracted to your art. So when you're doing your composition, make sure that you're satisfying the rational part of your brain so that things make sense.
Alright, so I'm going to ask you to visualize. So right here, this is just a floating head. We don't have any information going down. We don't know what is happening. We just know that it has stopped. So by laying this out and not putting any more information, it just feels abrupt. The minute we take it, and ignore all this extra stuff up here, I'm just trying to give you a visual, and we take it off the board, make sure everything's connected where we can, it feels ground. Again, we're ignoring this part. It feels connected. If I had a piece of wood if I was using a piece of wood this big, I would turn my wood so it wouldn't be upright, it would be horizontal. I would take it off the board. Well, first, I would enlarge my pattern to fill in the board. This is too much blank space that our brains don't like. We do need a resting spot, but this is too much. If there's no information here, your brain feels like it's unfinished. But then I would also make sure to take it off the board versus just sticking it in the middle and having it not continue down. If you can't make it any bigger, then I would recommend maybe finding a few reference photos of your subject that is similar and continue it off the board. That's one way you could do it. If you have a specific doggy that you're doing and you can't see all the information, it's not all clear, either enlarge that pattern so that it fills up more of the board and you can pick a corner that you want to have it anchored to while leaving space in other areas. Use a smaller board, or use some kind of border around it to seat it. Now if you do a border, so let's see here. So if you take this and you know, this is what you want to do. You don't have all the information. You've enlarged it as large as you can, but it's still a floating head. Create a border around it. And in doing that, make sure to leave enough space so nothing's touching the edge, but create a border around it. And because this is cut to the edge, it's going to be hard. You could even actually cut into the beak, bring it down, and then anchor your subject. But by taking it off and having it overlap in some areas, you're creating interest, and it feels less stark versus just having all of the blank space. Even if you are doing a total dark background, it will still fill off if the main subject is floating. So you need to anchor it however you can. Again, enlarging the photo, which I don't have, like, I'm trying to think if I have a larger photo or image of this pattern. I do, actually. I don't know. Hopefully this photo will help. So this is just a reference photo I print out when I'm working. But you see how it looks abrupt? It just stops. Whereas this continues down. It still just stops. So I wouldn't put that in the middle of a piece of paper. But from... These are slightly different patterns. So you'll have to visualize. So we've got our floating head. And, you know, like this, or we enlarge the pattern and anchor it down, and it feels better. So once you're, you know, not doing the outlines anymore and you're getting your tonal values right and you're still filling off, 9 times out of 10, it's gonna be how you've laid out your piece. So I highly recommend when I am laying out a piece, I take the size of my board and I make sure it's exact, as close as I can get it, in a Photoshop photo manipulation program. Have the exact aspects. So when I did this, I took my widest area, which is down here. I did a 13 by 31. Kind of drew in where the wood does cut in, so I know. And then I took my pattern and added a layer into that so I could actually lay my lines on a piece of perceived wood to see where everything was touching and how it sat. Now here for this ear, I had to make a decision. Do I make the bear smaller and keep the ear from touching the edge, or make it bigger and put an extension? It's a tree, but it almost acts like a border edge as well. It's almost a continuation of the bark. So it looks like the bear is going off of the border.
Oh.
What?
I didn't realize that you would burn the bark there.
No, this is the bark. This is the dark edge of the wood that I darkened. It is a tree in the background. It's a dark tree.
Oh, okay. I understand now.
But I'm using the bark to help fill in this tree so I can take it off, and it allows me to have a bigger piece, which means bigger eyes, more detail, versus if I went smaller. And with the we're moving, people, and with the stem down here, I've taken it off. In fact, I'll continue this one to touch the bark. This one as well. The flower will overlap here, same as here, to take it off. And if we look we're moving again. If we look up here, as much as I can stretch, because again, this is a big piece of wood, I've taken this branch off completely, as well as this one. These are going off as well, because if I had too many abrupt stops, excuse me, it just wouldn't look right. But I'm also ensuring that there's branches that are moving down, the same as we were talking about last week, because our eyes don't just read left to right or right to left, depending on what part of the world you're in, or up and down. It moves around. So I needed to have as much, without being obvious, as much of these stems, bringing your eye back into the piece versus taking off. Because if you put too much coming off your wood, you could make it where they're looking at your burning, they're looking around, they get to this branch, and then if I had a bunch of branches, it just take their eye away from the burning and onto the wall, and they're no longer looking at my subject. So it can be overwhelming, and the more you pay attention to it, that's why, and I wish I had a clear chart out. I pay attention to the rule of thirds, which I did use the rule of thirds with this. And what the rule of thirds is, very quickly, I'm going to bring the camera down so that I'm not having to stretch my arms to do this very quickly. Let's see, pencil. Rule of thirds, we'll do it on this, is when you take your wood or a piece of paper, and in the straight line, obviously not straight because I'm not using a ruler, I'm not trying to be perfect, I'm just trying to get you guys the information. You break up the photo in 3 pieces horizontally, in 3 equal pieces. All of this is equal.
You should have 9 squares, right?
Yep, 9 squares.
Yes.
Well, it could be more than 9, but it's going to be, so it could be 9, it's going to be multiples of 3s, starting with 9. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if I did an extra row and an extra line, actually it's in 6s after 9. Anyway, and let me do this.
Yeah, better.
Yeah. Alright, there's our rule of 3s. Every spot where these 2 connect is a point that our eye pays attention to. So instead of putting everything on center all the time, if you look, although this is on the center vertical, it's not on the center horizontal. We have the eye, which tells us subconsciously that that's an important area. We have the beak in the area. We have the shoulder of the wing. And we have the breast. All of these are protruding areas or areas of interest that we want to make sure in focus for our burning. Hopefully I didn't confuse anybody with that.
No, I think that's clear.
Okay, because there's also the Fibonacci, which that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole different thing.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. If you can stick to the rule of thirds, anchor your subject, and if you don't have all the information, you can add that information, or you can put a border. If you can't either enlarge or add, put that border. Let's see here, since we got the red. So if with this abrupt stop, I would Let's see here. So border, taking the bird off. Make sure. Actually, I could even come in down and put a border here underneath the head. And then bring it down. And what that does is it pops your subject up, grounds it, and makes it feel important versus just floating head.
If you think about
like the eye, like that one's a floating head.
If you think about the rule of thirds as like a framework, almost like it's like the structure of your work. And some of you might be doing rule of thirds unintentionally. And if you have a piece that people really like or that you really like, you may find that you may have unintentionally followed the rule of thirds.
Yep.
But it just kind of worked. There's a couple other tricks, and we already talked about, like you were talking about directional lines or lines of force. And your eye will travel around because, like, even as kids, like if you give a kid a maze, they're going to trace it, right? Because that's what we do. But that's what your eyes do. That's a human tendency, is to follow pathways. And so, almost like reading, words, your eye is going to follow the lines of force or lines of direction around the work. And it's if you have lines of force that lead off and don't connect to the image, it's sometimes you'll see people, like especially in a gallery setting, like they will stop at a painting and then they'll just move on. And the odds are is that they looked at it and the directional lines
didn't connect with them.
Didn't connect and led them off the work, and then they were just done with it, because that's what your brain does. Your brain goes, okay, and it's complete. I'm done. But if you have those lines follow your subject and lead back around, and it's not lines, it's just shapes and shadows and forms, it creates interest, and it causes the person's eye to travel around the piece in a continuous motion and always kind of come back. So it kind of traps them, enthralls them in the work. And then there's a couple other things. So you have things, points of tension, like the bear's ear that's close to the edge. It doesn't quite lead off. It is very close, but that becomes a focal point because it's so close to another element. And so your eye is going to be drawn there. And so you have these points, these focal points, or these points of tension where like things almost connect. And if you have a choice between connecting something and almost connecting it, like that, I think it's wiser not to connect it, because if you connect it, like in this case, if the bear's ear was just connected or led off the work, that would be the end of it. Your eye would travel off, but it doesn't. It creates, your eye is drawn there, and then whether you're going left to right or right to left, it'll follow around. But people's
and then the bark stops them. It almost acts like a wall,
right,
and brings them back in.
Right. So you're going to follow that ear around, and that's really important to have those shapes and shadows. The shadows often define like a line of travel for your eyes. So like in the case of the reference image there, you'll see that you can follow the ears around, but then you might get drawn towards the eyes, but that's because there's a shadow area that will bring you around the nose.
Still need to darken.
And it'll bring you around the nose to the eyes, then back up to the ear, and depending on how your brain works, it might bring you around the inside of the ear and to the edge, and then down like the tree, and then up. But your eye is gonna kind of always be drawn back to this bear's face, and you're going to be finding yourself continuously focusing on the bear's face, because your eyes are traveling around. And eventually, you may find that there might be points that you're come back to frequently, and your brain might register like, hey, I really like this. I really like this bear's eyes. It has a lot of character. But it's like advertising. It's doing that. The person is going to look at this work or your work, and they're going to feel connected to it, and they're going to have a feeling about it, and might be the character of your work, it might be the character of this bear or whatever, but the directional lines or the lines of force that continuously bring the viewer back to that give that work a chance to really connect with the viewer. And if you don't use those lines to your benefit, you could lose the viewer before they make a connection with your work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right now what I'm doing is I'm darkening up this portion. I mean, the tree needs to be darkened, and this does go back to the layout as well. The tree needs to be darkened, but part of... Oops, dropped my phone. Part of the layout for this piece is that the tree is going backwards.
It came out of the case.
Oh, did it? Well, it hit my leg first. Sorry. Thank you. So if we look, this is kind of, if we look at our reference, this is kind of more upright, like up like this.
Okay.
Thank you so much, love.
Good job.
But after this area, it actually falls back slightly. And that's due to the shadow and the lighting, partly. Partly it's the tree. But, so I need to darken all of this so it looks like the tree is going back, which is part of the layout that I wanted. Because I actually darkened areas of the tree, and then I added more highlight as well. This right here, looking at our reference, is the brightest area. And that's where it kind of gives us the bend, because, let's do it this way. The bend, because the tree is not straight up and down, and we don't want it to read straight up and down. And if I keep all my shadowing and tonal value the same, that's exactly how it's going to read. So that's why, as we're talking, I'm starting to darken up this, and if we look at the top of the tree, it actually comes forward a bit more, and although it's curved, it comes back up. So it's doing a soft dog leg and coming back up to us. And that was part of the layout. I wanted it to be an interesting, I know it's right in the middle, aspect of the piece, but the bear is the main subject. So it's okay for me to have something more in the center. The bear is anchored onto this tree because the head breaks off, kind of like a border. So although the body's touching, the head breaks off over the tree, bringing them together. Okay, and bringing our eyes again back up to the bear, which in this piece needs to go much darker. I did work on darkening areas. I darkened down here, and I'm still working on that. But this would be the only time I would put something straight, as in it's going straight up and down, in the middle of a piece. Normally, I would have it off to the side. And it is kind of in that there's less space here and there's more space over here, so it is offset. But that curve is helping me. And the thing is when somebody gets to the top of the piece, they're looking at the tree. Because of that curve, it brings them back into the bear. Everything is done intentional. I do need to watch the highlight on the left, I think, because it kind of takes us off. So I need to put more branches and leaves there in order to stop it. The leaves at the top of that highlight, I added those. There were some, but I added those, more of them. They act, again, like the bark as a wall, stopping your eye from leaving. And then there's that branch that, although it's going up, it can be read as coming back down to the tree, bringing us right back into the bear. Everything is intentional, because if I just had stopped here, or I just had a straight line going down, it would have been abrupt and it would have felt off. But because I've incorporated the bark into the burning visually, like I'm not burning off into this bark. This is basswood, and you know how with basswood there's the redder bark along the edge, and then we've got our light wood. I've incorporated that redder edge into the burning. Again, it still needs to be darker, but that keeps it feeling more natural. The bark visually stops your eye from leaving any further, and then we have all kinds of lines that bring us back into the piece. Same with over here. The bark acts as a wall, and then we've got branches and leaves that bring us back into the piece. I know that's a lot, and I know that can feel overwhelming. If you stick to the rule of thirds and just lay out, let me see here. I don't know. I'm going to check my patterns real quick and see for the bear if I have a saved photo with the rule of thirds on this specifically. Let's see. I don't know if I do. Of course, I've got the outlines. I don't know if I've got the rule of thirds on here. Doesn't look like well, Super Toasties, did I include a photo with the rule of third lines on it? What I am gonna pull up. This what I'm about to show you is the actual pattern for this piece, and how that's fine. Let's look. Just give me 1 second to pull this up. So this is going to be, where are all my images? All media files, come on. There we go. I'm looking for my layout on the wood. There we go. Because I was trying to figure out okay. I was close. I did the wrong ad. Let me try this again. Sorry about that. Video. Oh, no, I just went. There we go. That's what I want. Alright. So this is me trying to figure out which piece of wood is going to work better for my layout. Because I had another big piece of wood. Wasn't quite this size, but I was trying to figure out which would be better for this. Which piece? So you notice there's the piece of basswood. It was a photo I took. I overlaid my pattern on it. And then I'm trying to figure out, and I think looking at it, it's this piece of wood. Obviously, because it's what I ended up going with. So this is a photo of this piece of wood. because it wasn't a straight up and down like regular cut piece of wood, I had to figure out what was going to go over and what was going to stay contained within. And then as I was burning, I made the choice to bring in the red area. So this is me hanging out, trying to figure out the best way to lay out this piece of wood. Hey, Spence. Oh, I'm sorry Tex is sick. Tex, feel better, honey.
Yeah.
So that is how I laid this out onto my wood, was by actually taking a picture of my wood, taking the pattern I already drew, and overlaying it so I knew exactly where everything fit.
Where are you seeing Spence?
He sent a message.
Oh, okay.
So that is how I got to where I got. Let's see here. Alrighty. Is it a little blurry or is it nice and clear on the live?
Well, the reference is clear.
Well, yeah.
It's clear.
I'm talking about while I'm burning.
Yeah, it's been
Okay.
clear.
Okay, just making sure.
Pretty sure, anyway.
My eyes feel a little.
She's obsessed.
Yeah.
She's standing at the gate barking.
This is me pulling heat from my pen. And so I'm just flat working on the shading. I've already got my the important elements that I want. Right now I'm at 3.5 with the 18 small. And I'm just moving around.
You okay?
Yeah, my voice
I know.
got tired. My sinuses have been draining.
Sorry.
So let's see here. This is our lightest area. Pushing our tree back. Because right now, it looks like it's not going back as much as I want. So I'm actually going to darken and leave less light. So this can be brighter. Yeah, it's my sinuses. I'm okay. Sorry about that. Thought I'd go for the husky voice.
So something too that's always a decision is that when you're doing reference photos, like this one here, the background is blurry. And if you'll notice, like between the tree, kind of where Val's working at right now, if you look
Right
at
here?
the reference, yeah,
Okay.
the background itself is pretty blurry, and the tonal values aren't really that different, but there's contrast there because the tree's in sharp focus and the background isn't. And so when you don't have an area that has high contrast, you can use clarity as a kind of a contrast to help define your forms. And so
That's a good explanation.
yeah, and so in this case, you have this particular area that doesn't have as much contrast as the rest of the work, but there is some contrasting clarity, and that can be real important, because if it was all in sharp focus, then you might lose the edge of the tree, and you might have to make some artistic choices upon about the highlight on the tree to create that more of that contrast. Now there is a little bit of highlight there which helps with the contrast, so that
I actually added more.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Okay, so
because there wasn't.
You made that choice.
I made that artistic choice on my reference. Yes.
Okay. So,
I added it. There was lighter bark, but because we've got glow on the bear, we've got some light on the shoulder. There needed to be some more light hitting the edge for it to make sense.
And that goes.
So I added more.
And that goes back to what we're talking about as far as your composition making sense, and the lighting has to make sense also, because if you have like a composite, and some people will do this.
This is a composite.
Right. So if you have a composite, but you have different light sources for different items in your composite, so like the bear, let's say it's the bear, the light was hitting it from the top right, and then the tree, the light was hitting it from the top left. Your brain is going to see that, and just in the same way that like a floating head isn't going to make sense, your brain is also going to be like, hey, wait, what? This doesn't make sense.
It may not know why.
Right.
It just knows it doesn't read right.
And so that can sabotage a piece of work too, because if all of your lighting is harmonious, but if you have an area where the lighting is not lighting and shadow is not placed correctly, then the rational part of your brain is going to direct your eyes to that and be like, hey, what's going on here? And then when it realizes what's going on, the viewer may dismiss your work and say, oh, well, it doesn't make sense. Moving on. And so it's really important to have that harmony of, light and shadow, that interplay of light and shadow. Make sure that all of your light sources are coming from the same direction. And then like something that I would say, because especially when you do interior work, you might have several light sources, right? But I think that starting out, I think that the simpler you can keep it with your light sources, the more successful that you will be. And then as you get more practiced, you can start doing work that has multiple light sources. Like for instance, the bear that Burl is doing, that's in the water, right?
2 ears, yeah.
Right. Okay. So there's going to be counter light coming off the water that's going to be reflecting up to the bear, and so that becomes a secondary light source. And it's important that it's there, because if it's not there, then when the viewer looks at it, they're going to be like, wait a minute, why isn't the light reflecting off of the bear from the water? And they may not even be able to verbalize that or explain it, but they'll know something's off. And they'll see it and they'll be like, nice bear, moving on. But if everything is working together in your piece, and you have that harmony between your lights and your shadows, and you have your lines of your directional lines and your rule of thirds, and everything working together, that's all part of composition. And if it's all working together, you will have a much better chance of having a successful piece of work.
Again, it's not to call anybody out. These are things that you learn as you go along.
No, yeah.
And hopefully we help by furthering you quicker.
Right.
Versus trying to figure it out years down the road and looking at your pieces going, well, damn. Wish I would have known that then.
And this is where, like, being an artist, where you have a lot of control over what the viewer sees and the message that you're portraying. And, in photography, for instance,
excuse me,
less control, but with different lenses and things like that, a good photographer
and processing of the actual image
can make those same kinds of choices and create those same kind of controls for their work, and that's what makes that artistic and not just a photo. But you as an artist, there's, I think a lot of people when they come into art, especially if they're doing realism, they see it and they're like, I want to make this, the most realistic woodchuck ever. And then you do it, and then people aren't impressed with it. They'll like, oh, cool woodchuck. And the reason why they're having that reaction is that your woodchuck might be technically fabulous, but compositionally it might be problematic. And so if you have work that you are super proud of because of its accuracy, and people aren't responding to it, look at the rule of thirds, look at how the lines of force direct the viewer around, and look at the interplay of light and shadow, and see if there maybe isn't something that's missing. And we've mentioned this before, because you are close to your work, you might not be able to see it. So you have a couple options. You can either bring somebody else in, who can kind of, in this case, you might need somebody with a little bit of artistic experience, who can kind of, who understands the lingo and
that's when I help the members.
Right. But if you don't have that, you can always turn the piece upside down or look at it in a mirror or take a picture of it and flip it.
Yeah.
And
just taking a picture, you don't even have to flip it.
Right.
Actually.
That'll allow your creative side to disengage from it enough for your rational side to take a hard look at it and see what might be the problem. And so I think that those are really important things to know as an artist, whatever your medium. But you have all these tools available to you that you may not have known that you had, but they are tools not only help you make beautiful art, but they're tools to help you influence your viewer to really
hear your voice.
Yeah.
Artistic voice.
Right. To really consider your work as opposed to just looking at it and moving on. And we're very technical and we know how stuff is supposed to look. Even if you've never seen an animal before, you understand like what fur is supposed to look like, and you understand what shadows and light are supposed to look like. And if something's not clicking, it's going to turn the viewer off. And like I said, it might be technically wonderful, but if you aren't using those other tools to help your work, you might not be as successful. And then here's an interesting thing. So you may, as an artist, you may see other people's work who is technically maybe not so good, right? But people are like, oh wow, this work is amazing. If you look at that work, even though you don't like it or you don't connect to it, you may find that the techniques that artist is using, is compositionally, are
interesting.
Are creating that interest and are causing people to interact with that and to engage with it. So it might not be the best painting or best wood burning or whatever, but if they're using their rule of thirds and if they're using the light and shade, and if they're using their directional lines, intentionally or unintentionally, and color, all that is working together on them. It could be a technically inferior piece of work, but it might be very popular. And if you've ever wondered, like, how does somebody like that piece of work, or like especially with like modern art or abstract art, those are things that abstract artists and modern artists, they use those things religiously.
That's their main...
Because they don't have... I mean, they're using structure, but they're using it in a different way. But they don't have realism, or they're not using realism, but they're using those other tools. And so they may not have a subject that interests you, but their work, especially for non-artists, for people who aren't looking specifically for any one thing, they may find that there's a particular painting or a photograph or a work of art, whatever, that they just are enthralled with it and they don't know why. And 90% of the time, that's why.
That's how they laid it out. Yeah, I went pretty dark there, but that's okay. I'm gonna darken other areas.
I know I'm chatty, but I'm trying to give your voice a break.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't know what that's about. Again, I'm trying to push the tree back. No. Turn down my heat a little bit. I'm not using any flame. This is just hot air. And although it's burning kind of grayish, when I varnish, it will turn brown. So that's why I'm not stressing about it.
And this all goes back to understanding what your tools do and how they interact with the substrate. In this case, the wood and the kind of wood. If you don't understand that, like, life will be harder. Like, as an artist, like, especially like when we're mixing colors and stuff, a lot of colors will shift when they dry. They'll shift value, or they'll shift intensity when they dry.
Especially with the acrylics.
Yeah. So you have to understand what's going to happen when it dries, or when it is sealed, you know, and varnished. You know, you have to understand what is going to happen, and that only comes with experience and
Practice.
And practice, you know. But once you get that practice and you get that experience, then you can become a lot more confident in doing something because you understand what the end result's going to be. But like anything, it takes practice and iteration. And I think a lot of people have this idea. It's a very human idea that you're going to do something and be a prodigy at it. And some people are, but I think a lot of times that's accidental. You'll have artists or musicians who have, you know, an amazing piece of work or amazing hit, and then never again. And, you know, it's because they managed to coincidentally get everything right, you know, and but they don't have the training or the experience to duplicate it a second time, because they don't understand what they did. You know, they know they did something and that it was awesome, but they can't do it again, you know.
Whew, I gotta give my shoulder a break. Ugh.
It's like when Morgan was little, when she was a little puppy, she jumped up on the bed, which is like 3 feet up, and she just popped up on the bed, and she was like, whoa, how do I get up here? And then she didn't do it again for like a couple months because she didn't know how she did it.
Yeah,
you know, it wasn't repeatable. She had to practice.
Well, she didn't realize it was repeatable.
Exactly.
Let's see here. Pull off any graphite.
And none of this is meant to be discouraging.
No. It's meant to help.
If we all have work.
Yep.
I think that some people are like, oh, this is amazing, you know, and maybe you have like a couple pieces where people are like that, but then, you know, a truckload of other stuff that people are like, oh, that's cool, you know, and you wonder why, you know. That's why. Look at the pieces that you have that are successful and that you're happy with, and look at them from the point of view of composition and these different compositional tricks that we've been talking about, or techniques, not really tricks, and see what applies, and you may find that you're able to repeat those things in the future and make other work that people gravitate towards.
I'm just putting in my brightest area so that I know where it's at. Because I'm checking.
Jesus, Roxy. She's standing at the gate, barking angrily.
I'm supposed to be in there.
I know what she's mad about. She got a walk and a bone.
But she's not in here. I'm just picking out my brightest. Again, on the reference, I added this highlight. And I'm going to put it in more with the pan pastel. I'm just doing this so I have it marked out. So I know where not to take it too much hotter. Remember, there's curves and dips. There's not going to be a highlight where there's a dip. And I'm going to need to better shape this so it doesn't stand out like that. Which is fine. I'm just trying to make this feel like it's going back, and it still needs dark up in some areas. That's okay. And then we got our lights up there. Let's see here. It's probably hard to read. So I'm gonna do this so we can read it a little bit better. I'm looking at my reference. I know that my placement isn't perfect for some of this because this is like a claw mark. But it's a tree, so I don't care. It's a tree. I'm not gonna freak out about it. It's a tree. So do we have any questions?
Chapter quiet.
Yeah, they are. Oh,
What's up with that?
I don't know. Got things to do, maybe? I don't know. Let's
Hopefully
back
they can
this
hear
up.
us. I mean, we got 7 watching.
Back out the bear. Remember, the bear is actually darker in person. It's just the light. Let's see if I can get this 90 degrees like it's hanging on a wall so you can better see how dark it actually is. See, not as dark, closer to what it is in person. And where we were working is darker than it looks. Oh, this is heavy. And again, on layout, I made sure to bring this tree in the back to make it look like a frame that the ear is breaking. That way, it feels more put together and more interesting.
Andrea says, thanks, Val, and me. Great class.
Well, thank you. Next week. I think next week is going to be a members only live.
Okay.
We'll do, I'm going to try to do it where we do 2 public lives and 2 member lives a month.
Okay.
If you want all the lives, you become a member. Hit the join button next to the subscribe button. And if you're new, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Please hit like so YouTube will actually show other people that, hey, this is worth watching. Excuse me. Members, when they get the lives, there are no ads because you're already paying at least $5 a month. I don't put any ads on the members' lives, so you don't have to worry about that. Let's see here.
What just happened?
Oh, there's some new settings for YouTube, and I was just trying to figure out what it was.
Okay.
That's all. I saw it, and I was like, what is it? Did we stop streaming?
I don't know. I'm still live.
Okay, because I saw that the
But you're on a
screens...
different screen. That's what I
Oh, no. It's that pause. That's the playback. But as long as you're going, we're good. All right. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're new. Also, please check to make sure you're subscribed. If you've hit subscribe in the past and you haven't been seeing the lives until now, it may be that YouTube has unsubscribed you. So please make sure to hit that subscribe button again. Again, you can join. You get the patterns. In fact, there's the pattern, multiple sizes of the bear. There's an 8x10 pattern. There's a 9x12 pattern. And then there's the full pattern. You get that in the Facebook group. the secret, super secret,
Earl is not at home.
got it, super secret Facebook group. If you don't want to join through YouTube, you can join through Ko-fi, which is linked down in the description. And you'll still get the same perks. And that I did that so if you're not wanting to pay through YouTube and you don't have a Facebook group or Facebook, you get all the posts on the Ko-fi as well, so that you're not left out. I'm trying to think. If you've joined and you can't find the Facebook link, you can go into the Drawing with Fire big group and send me a message, and I will get that to you. Do I got anything else? So, yep, next week will be Members Night, Members Live, no ads. The following week, we will be back for a public, and if you're watching on replay, leave in the comments what you would be interested in seeing for the next public live. What subject do you want me to tackle in regards to burning for the next public live? That would greatly help, because we've done outline, tonal value, and composition. Those are the three biggest things in realism to have your wood burning look exactly the way, or feeling exactly the way you want it to feel. I say look because, things could be off. You can make artistic choices, move things around, but it will feel the way you want it to feel with those three things. So, you know what to say with this. Say it with me.
Yeah, with me.
With me. You're awesome. You can do this. Why? Because you're a pyro artist. Happy burning, guys, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Bye. It's food time.